have knowledge for both, and it doesn't change either or.
So
Your argument would imply a contradiction which can't exist. Since mine does not, my interpretation is inherently likelier. Because what I'm using is the buuhan statement saying he's the strongest.
hold on. First off, there's no contradiction there, and even if you were to argue that there's contradictions, Dragon Ball's full of them. I don't get what that argument would bring.
There could be contradictions, but it's up to interpretation. So interpretations meant to minimize contradictions would be inherently likelier. For example, there are a lot of buuhan statements that call him the strongest Majin. So I made a distinction between Majin and Buu. Buu could just be referring to more so pure boobs or not absorption boos, which is kind of backed up. I'm not using him as like direct evidence, but Koyama on Twitter made that distinction.
Well, Koyama's already said that he's not an authority. Please don't use him.
I've already wait. I'm not using him. I already said I'm not using him as direct evidence. I'm using him as supplementary evidence towards the why that interpretation could be the case. Why it's a possibility, not necessarily that it is. And I'm just using the other evidence to say that it's likelier.
Okay, so then what statements say that buuhan is the most powerful one?
There are a lot of just random data book statements saying he's the strongest Majin. And what I was trying to say is that they always use different wording. Whenever they talk about Kid Buu, they always call him the strongest Buu. But for most buuhan statements, they just call him the strongest Majin. But yeah.
So this, even if you were to say the strongest Buu or the strongest Majin, that would be the same thing.
No, Majin is would incorporate more things. It would incorporate the Boos and people from the demon realm too. While Buu, I offered again, Boos in this context would just be referring to non-absorptions, which would be the most.
Okay, so then what evidence gives credence to that idea that it's just specifically talking about Boos that are unfused?
It would lead to the least amount of contradictions.
Yeah, that doesn't answer my fucking question.
Yes, it does. That's evidence. No. Yes, it would be inherently likelier.
Wait. So you understand that even Buu Tanks refers to Buikalo as a former Buu, right?
Yeah, I'm not talking about that.
No. Hush.
Go ahead.
Because you said that Boos would be in reference to unfused. That's not true.
That's not what I said. I said in the context of these statements specifically, that it'd be likelier, it'd be more consistent if they're talking about just pure Boos. Because buuhan is still a Buu. They still call him a Buu. But I'm just saying in the context of these statements.
He's also still, okay. He's still a Buu, but the issue, what's in question first is like with Goku. If he talks about all other forms of Buu, he would also be talking about buuhan.
Why? It's not as consistent.
Okay, so if you, all right, this whole consistent point, you have statements that say that buuhan is the most powerful one. You also have statements that say that Kid Buu is the most powerful one.
They're worded differently.
So, you said what?
But they're worded differently. They call buuhan the strongest Majin. They call Kid Buu the strongest Buu. So I'm trying to make a distinction. Okay, so how can we have both of these statements be true at the same time to make the likeliest interpretation? Because we can't just, because I'm not just going to say, oh, well, let's just throw out all the Kid Buu statements, buuhan's number one, or let's just throw out all the buuhan statements, Kid Buu's number one, right? Like the best way to look at these statements is try to interpret them in a way where they can both coexist.
Okay. So let's because I still don't understand why there's a separation happening here. Is Buu not a Majin all of a sudden?
I never said he wasn't. I'm saying wait. I'm saying he is a Majin. That's why when buuhan's called
so
he's above Kid Buu as well.
Okay, so if he's still a Majin, you're saying, okay, he's the strongest Majin, but then this other statement is saying he's the strongest Buu. But the Boos aren't, like, they're not separated from being Majins. So
I'm not saying they're separated.
They would still be included.
Yes, the Boos would be included as a Majin, but what my issue is that when we're saying Kid Buu is the strongest Buu, in these statements, we're applying that to every form of Buu. And I even gave supplementary evidence of Koyama, who's not necessarily, what's it called? What's the word I'm looking at? Who's not necessarily an authority, but he still gave an interpretation similar to mine which would just be supplementary evidence.
That doesn't mean that both of you are right, though.
I'm not saying we're right. I'm just using like to say this is a possibility.
Okay, well, your possibility doesn't hold true to what an abundance of evidence tells you.
There's
Go ahead.
Actually.
Okay, that's what I thought. You have Goku, you have narrator, Toriyama, guidebooks. Yes. For you, you're saying I have me and Koyama and what I think is consistent. No, that's what's happening.
What I have is guidebooks and just contradictions not being inherently likelier.
Okay, contradictions still exist in the Buu saga. That doesn't change anything. You would just go simply.
I never said they didn't. I already said this earlier that if there is two separate statements that are seemingly contradictory, then we should interpret it in a manner where we can minimize contradictions, because that would be an inherently likelier interpretation. That's it. Right? I'm not even saying like I'm not even like necessary. I'm not even attacking what you meant by like Toriyama. Are you talking about the Frieza shorter thing?
Like, it wasn't specifically only in reference to Frieza, but yes,
that one. Scan, though, right? That's the one.
You said what?
I'm saying like the one where Frieza's in the scan.
Yes.
That. I don't even think that necessarily means anything. Because it could be a general rule. Not even a general. It doesn't have to be a general rule that the shorter ones are always smaller, right? Because that would be the most. That would not be as.
Nobody said it's a general. It just
actually. Wait, sorry.
Goji, dude.
Yeah.
Nobody said it's a general rule. It's a consistent rule, though.
Yeah.
That's the issue. But consistent, like, in this context, there would be moments where it happens and then moments where it doesn't happen. We would also have to be defining how we're gonna call consistent. That's the other thing too with the whole Kid Buu and buuhan thing. You want to talk about consistency? Consistent. What?
I just realized. Your framing earlier about how you have the anime, manga guidebooks of Toriyama. I also have those things under my interpretation because you're.
I never said anime, manga, guidebooks.
Whatever you said. You had what guidebooks, Toriyama? What else?
I said you have Goku, the narrator, Toriyama, guidebooks.
I also have those things because those are just a part of my argument, but in a separate interpretation. So if we really think about this, I have more things. I have the buuhan statements and everything else you say. You don't have the buuhan statements because I'm just interpreting those other things differently to be more consistent.
Okay, once again, just because you interpret it differently doesn't mean that you're fucking correct.
Because it doesn't necessarily. I'm not saying it's like a fact that it's objective. Buuhan is stronger, right? But because I'm incorporating more evidence by being more consistent, less contradictions, it's likelier. I'm establishing a likelihood. That's it.
Okay, so all right, so then let's start from step one then.
Sure.
Let's just do this. Let's start from step one. Where, in terms of all 8 Buus, where do you have Kid Buu?
He's number 2.
He's number 2?
He's are we including like Bootanks and stuff? I think Bootanks is more debatable, but like
I said 8 Buus, so that would be all of them.
I don't really care about Kid Buu versus Bootanks. I could like
I didn't ask you. I didn't ask you if you cared. I'm asking you where you put Kid Buu.
I know. I'm in the context I'm talking about. I'm talking about whether I would put him above or below. That's what I mean. But real quick, I'm not really sure if Bootanks has the same quality of statements as Buuhan. If he does, then
that isn't.
I'm just not sure. I don't have an opinion. But I do think Kid Buu's above Super Buu, and shit, he would beat Super Buu's ass.
Okay, so all right, let's do this because you're not really answering the question.
Because I just don't have an opinion.
The problem is you just danced around that and you didn't answer my question. You
just want me to state out an opinion I haven't even thought about? Okay.
If I want to start from step one, I want to see how we need to go about addressing where Kid Buu is first.
Yeah, but like I don't
because I'm not gonna be sitting here wasting my breath on an argument that shouldn't be made.
I think Kid Buu versus like Bootanks isn't really relevant. If you think it's relevant, like you could tell me how, and then
it would be relevant because that would also include, if we're talking about Bootanks and Kid Buu, that would also be including what your argument was earlier about the differences between Majins and Buus.
right? But like,
Boo Tanks. So hold on.
go on.
If Boo Tanks is being operated under your paradigm, being the fusion of boos being their own thing versus the unfused versions,
Yeah.
Boo Tanks and Kid Boo would very much be relevant. So what I'm asking you is, where do you have Kid Boo out of all 8 boos?
Just 2 or 3. I'm gonna be like so honest with you. I don't know, because the only Wu-Tang statements I'm aware of is just the one where he says, I'm the strongest Majin in past, present, and future, and it's like, that's a fallible character statement. I don't even know if he has any guidebook statements to back it up or anything. So like, who cares? I don't know. Kid Buu is 2 or 3.
Okay, right? So he's 2 or 3. So yeah, then if you're putting him at number 2, then your earlier argument fails.
No, it's because Wu-Tang isn't called the strongest Majin or whatever. Like, and my thing. Wait. My thing is, like, okay, it could be the case as in Kid Buu could be number 2 because he can scale to the Spirit Bomb, and I don't think.
Wait. Hold on. What? Let me ask you this. Why are you referring to buuhan as just simply a Majin? Are you just going off of?
No, he's a Buu too, but like, I was just referring in the context of the statements. That's what it likelier means. But
okay. So now your argument's switching up.
It's never changed.
No.
I've always had that position.
No. You are slowly starting to change it now, because
I haven't changed it one bit. I've repeated it multiple times that I believe that in the context of these statements, the one specifically talking about Kid Buu being the strongest Buu, it is referring to non-absorption's Buu. But that doesn't mean that in every single case where they talk about Buu, that doesn't mean that buuhan or Wu-Tangs aren't included.
No, that's the entire point of what you were talking about with the whole Majins and the Boos. That's the entire point of that.
That's because you misinterpreted it. Doesn't mean I changed it.
Dude, can you put a muzzle on it for the love of fucking God?
I mean, if you're misrepresenting the argument, but sure, go ahead.
I'm not misrepresenting shit.
Go ahead.
Earlier, that's what your entire argument was. You were separating the fused versions versus the unfused because you are categorizing. Shut up.
Okay.
Like, you were separating the unfused from the fused by categorizing them under Majins and categorizing the other ones under Boos. So if you are putting fusions, right, arguably weaker, or at least let's say a fusion, arguably weaker than Kid Buu, then the whole difference between unfused and fused doesn't even really fucking matter with the paradigm that you used.
All right, so my issue is that I was separating them in the context of strength statements, not generally. And when we talk about Wu-Tangs versus Kid Buu, it doesn't mean just because Kid Buu's statements don't refer. I'm not using Kid Buu's statements to say he's above Wu-Tangs, like that potential argument. I brought up specifically like he might have feats that you could argue, but I really don't care. Like, I don't have a specific opinion. I could have Wu-Tangs above him. Who cares? Like, because it would only be an issue if I was using the Kid Buu statements to say he's above Wu-Tangs, which I'm not. So.
I think you missed the total point of what I was trying to make. The total point I was trying to make, I didn't even specify anything about statements. I was using your argument,
well,
and showing you the issue with the argument that you're making now, because the argument that you're making now consistently hold with the argument that you first gave when you first came up here.
The reason I specified statements is because that's the context where we're talking about, right?
Yes, because
it wouldn't be a contradiction otherwise.
Yes, but the problem is, you said, well, this would make a contradiction, therefore it would be more consistent if X would be Majins and X would be Boos. This is how we're gonna, because of buuhan's being Majins, this would be only for him, not unfused. Kid Buu being the most powerful out of the Boos would make unfused. But the problem is, if you are inherently agreeing, right, that an unfused can still be in the same line of strength and even higher than Majins, then the whole Majin and Buu thing, that whole argument kind of goes out the window.
Why is it a contradiction? Like, let me ask you this question first. If I say, okay, Buuhan is the strongest because he's the strongest Majin. Kid Buu can be the strongest out of the pure Boos because he's like he has those statements. There is no contradiction of Kid Buu being above Buu tanks because those statements aren't limiting statements. It's not limiting Kid Buu to only scaling to the pure Boos. If there's other evidence that proves he's above Buu tanks, that could be the case because Buu tanks earlier doesn't have the same qualities.
What are we classifying as a contradiction? Because I think I have a very different definition than what you're using.
Okay, well, if we have two statements, Buuhan is the strongest Buu, and then Kid Buu's the strongest Buu. If we both agree that the definition of Boos they're using are the same, then that's a contradiction.
Okay, so here, hold on. Let's do this.
I love Dragon Ball Lives. Kid Buu has better feats than Buuhan? I don't think that necessarily matters.
Alright. I mean, I just like lives in general.
Kid Buu's the strongest in the anime? Like, I understand the opinion, I just don't agree with it.
This is low-key so dumb, bro. I mean, look at that, bro. Look, you're gonna attack him, and I'm gonna do that.
The issue is that you have to justify, like, any anti-feats for why Buuhan can't do the same. Sorry.
All right, so are we classifying? Because this is still going on about that argument earlier. Are you classifying Buu tanks as a Majin or a Buu?
Buu in the context of pure Boos, no, but he's Buu as in like he is a Buu, as in like the entity Buu, and yes, he is also a Majin.
Okay, so if he's also a Majin, right, and we're talking about statements that would directly oppose something else, right? We're understanding contradiction to be something that opposes directly, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So if Buu tanks, right, has one statement where he says that I am the strongest Majin, past, present, and future,
Yes.
and you have Buuhan that says I'm more powerful than I ever was before, you have an inherent contradiction.
You do have a contradiction, but that's between fallible character statements. What I was bringing up earlier with the Kid Buu Buuhan example, those are like data book guide statements, which aren't meant to be fallible. They are meant to give information on the series that is correct.
Okay, well, the issue is even the guidebooks would be opposing each other. Because even guidebooks flat. We can go with the anime. Kid Buu has one guidebook where I think it just flat out states that he has just he possesses the greatest strength. Right? So that would be a generalized statement as opposed to any of them.
But it's also, yet again, in the context of guidebook Kid Buu statements, most of the time they call them Boos, like just Buu. So that could also just be applied there to make it more consistent. And I was also using those Kid Buu guide statements earlier because, yes, they're seemingly contradictory, but not under my interpretation.
Okay, so,
I'm sorry for saying this again, but they also do just call Buuhan the strongest, like sometimes, not even just Majin or Buu. So it's like, it's probably.
So then why does the Majin and Buu thing matter?
What do you mean? Because that's what they are called most of the time. There are some exceptions, like you named and I just named, and then I just argued that those would just be referring to the most of the time what they're referred to as, like Maj and Buu.
So then, if they're sometimes called Majins and they're sometimes called Boos, how are you grounding your argument in Majins would be specific to fusions, Boos would be specific to unfused?
Majin isn't specific to fusion. Majin is just, in general, would include fusions, would include Boos, and would also include people from the demon world, like Glorio and shit, right? But Boos, to make it work with the Majin statement, because we know what Majin means.
Yes,
so
it means demon.
Yes.
Yes, I'm well aware.
So to make it work with that statement, you could interpret it like I am, or you could interpret it some other weird way. But my interpretation, I'm claiming it as the primary possibility because other people like Koyama, who I'm not using as direct evidence, I'm using as supplementary evidence, have interpreted the same way.
Okay, so the issue being is you're going to have a real hard time trying to keep that consistent, because if Majin is, this is why I said that I don't understand why the separation is happening. Because while, yes, Majin would be including all these people, right? Like, not just the boos, but also these people. But calling him boos, right, would still be holding to previous forms that were still being referred to as Majin. That's why I'm not understanding why there's a separation being made.
There's a separation being made because if we just interpreted it like strong as Boo just in general, strong as Majin, it would be a contradiction. So I'm making a separation to remove contradictions.
Okay, the problem is, once again, we come back to the fact that there already is contradictions. The issue is that we're going to try to find what's more consistent, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Wait.
But the issue is that you can't say we have to find what's consistent, therefore there can't be you like I don't understand what you're into.
Okay. So there's a contradiction here, but now we can take a few sides. 3 sides. Kid Boo's the strongest. You would take 75% of the evidence. Let's just say, throw out a number. If you take Buuhan's side, you take 25%. What I'm saying is say, okay, my argument can fit with all of the statements. If we're going to say Kid Boo's the strongest, and there's a contradiction, then what do you take of the Buuhan statements? What do you think they mean?
Like which ones?
Like that he's the strongest Majin. Like, since you have Kid Boo's side, they have to mean something. They're a contradiction, but what's their purpose?
They would just no longer hold any weight. They would no longer be true.
Okay, yeah. So I've actually heard a few people on the Kid Boo side say, well, just give other interpretations for those to actually have them a part of their argument. But that's a little separate, so I won't go into that. So basically what I'm just doing is the same thing they're doing. I'm using all of it by interpreting it a different way. And I would just argue, well, a contradiction would just be likelier. A non-contradiction would be likelier than a contradictory argument. So,
okay, that's fine. But what I'm also saying is that if you have a contradiction, that would mean that you have a direct opposition, meaning that there's an error somewhere.
Well, I don't have a contradiction in my argument.
There are contradictions that exist to your argument, is my point.
They're just... okay.
Just because you want to say that there's not, doesn't...
Yeah, go ahead.
There's literally contradictions to that argument.
I thought you were referring to, like, the statements. Like, I'm saying all the statements, none of them would be contradictory to each other under my worldview.
They would, though. That's why I pose the Boo Tanks and Buuhan statements.
Why? I don't like. Wait, real quick. Is it that, like, we've already gone over the boot tank stuff? So if you want to just say that, then I guess it's okay. But if there's something else you want to add, yeah, go ahead.
No, there's nothing else that I need to add. That one would be sufficient enough.
I've given an argument why I don't think so. You've given your side, so I think I'm down. Just saying that's it. Unless you got something else to add, I'm fine.
I mean, the problem is you're bringing up the Majin and the Boo thing, trying to say that there would be a separation, but that you don't have a basis for that argument.
I do. The fact that non-contradictions are inherently likelier than contradictions. But, like, what I'm just saying again, like, I've already said that. You've already said that. Do you want to just keep going ad nauseum here, or you just want to end it? I mean, because I don't have anything new to say. Do you have something new to say that you haven't said already? If not, then I don't see the point in continuing this. I think I'm fine ending this now.
I mean, I don't really give a shit.
All right. Have a good day, man.
Okay.